Welcome back to Science Corner, everybody. I am so excited for our deep dive today. We're going to be tackling a concept that seems pretty simple on the surface, but gets really fascinating the deeper you go. We're talking about instinct.
Always a fun one.
We've got a couple of Wikipedia articles to guide us, one on instinct itself, and then another on something called fixed action patterns, which we'll definitely have to unpack. And we've also got a really interesting article on the history and criticisms of something called instinct theory.
Yeah, you might be surprised how much debate there actually is around what seems like a pretty basic biological idea.
Well, let's see if we can shed some light on all of that debate then. Where would you even begin with defining instinct? Because I feel like we use that word all the time, but maybe not always in a super precise way.
I think that's right. We do kind of throw the word instinct around pretty casually. Scientifically speaking, I think the simplest way to define instinct is as an inherent inclination toward a complex behavior. So it's not something that's learned. It's really driven by those inborn biological factors.
So it's more than just like a simple reflex.
Right. Like way more complex. A reflex is something super simple, like you're knee-jerking when the doctor taps it. But instincts, those involve a whole sequence of actions, and often they can be incredibly elaborate and complex.
Okay, so I'm already thinking about those nature documentaries. You see those sea turtle hatchlings and they scramble towards the ocean. They've never seen the ocean before, but they just know, right?
Right. That is a classic example of instinct and a very vivid one, too. It really highlights how vital these inborn behaviors can be for survival.
Oh, for sure. Those little turtles need to get to the water or they're not going to make it. So it's like pre-programmed in a way to make sure they do the right thing from the get-go.
And it makes you wonder how that information gets passed down. Right?
It really does. Now, you mentioned how instincts can be really complex, and that makes me think about these fixed action patterns that I saw in one of our sources. What exactly are those?
Right. Fixed action patterns, or FAPs for short, it's essentially how we observe instincts actually playing out, especially in the animal world. Think of them as a sequence of behaviors, but they're very specific and predictable, like each step leads to the next in a very particular order.
Kind of like a chain reaction almost.
Precisely. And for a behavior to actually qualify as a true FAP, it has to meet some pretty strict criteria. So first, it has to be stereotyped.
Stereotyped, so meaning it always happens in the same way.
Exactly the same way every time. It has to be complex, too, more than just a single reflex, and it has to be specific to that particular species. You don't see the same FAPs across all different kinds of animals.
So that's the fixed part, I guess. But what triggers these patterns in the first place? How does an animal know when to start that whole chain reaction?
That is where the releaser comes in, and it's a crucial part of the whole thing. The releaser is a specific feature that triggers the FAP. It might be a shape, a color, a sound, some kind of sensory cue that acts as the signal to get things going.
So it's like a specific key that fits into a specific lock.
Perfect analogy. And the classic example here is the gray-lag goose and its egg retrieval behavior. So if the goose sees an egg outside the nest, that visual cue is the releaser.
So it sees the egg, and that's what sets the whole thing off.
Yep. And then the goose goes through this whole very specific sequence. It fixates on that egg, extends its neck, and then uses its beak to roll it back into the nest.
And it just knows to do that.
Well, it's not really conscious knowing in the way we think about it, but here's where it gets even more interesting and even more fixed, I guess. Even if you take the egg away while the goose is in the middle of rolling it back, it will continue those motions as if the egg was still there.
Wow, so it really is fixed. Like it can't stop itself once that releaser starts the process.
Yeah.
That is amazing. And it makes you wonder what's going on in that goose brain when that happens.
It really does, doesn't it? It's like a program that has to run its course. And I think that brings us to another crucial point about releasers, and it kind of gets at the why behind all of this. The releaser is often tied to the animal's survival. It's not just any random thing. It's something that signals something really important.
So those FAPs, they might seem rigid, but they're actually incredibly sophisticated adaptations that help animals survive, right?
Exactly. And I think the more we look at these examples, the more we start to appreciate how much complexity is packed into these seemingly simple behaviors.
Absolutely. And it's amazing how specific those releasers can be and how they can really, dictate behavior. A great example of this is male stickleback fish. During mating season, they develop this really bright red belly.
Oh, yeah, I've seen pictures of those. They're pretty striking.
And that red belly becomes the releaser for aggression in other males. So they'll attack anything that has a red belly, even if it's just a crude model, as long as the red is more intense than their own. Wait, so they would actually be more riled up by a fake fish than a real rival. That seems kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It does, but it actually illustrates this really cool concept called supernormal stimuli. And it's basically an exaggerated version of the natural releaser, and it ends up triggering an even stronger response. Remember that gray lag goose we talked about with the egg? If you were to give it a volleyball next to its real egg, it might actually choose to roll back the volleyball because it's just so much bigger.
Oh, wow. So we can kind of trick an animal's instincts by, like, manipulating those releasers. That's fascinating and kind of unsettling at the same time.
It really is. It makes you wonder about all the ways that those instincts can be manipulated, both in nature and, maybe even in ourselves. And there's one example in nature that's especially striking, and that's brood parasitism. And the cuckoo bird is like the poster child for this.
The cuckoo. I know they've got a bit of a sneaky reputation when it comes to eggs.
Oh, yes, sneaky is putting it lightly. They've basically perfected the art of exploiting other birds' instincts. So the female cuckoo, she'll lay her eggs in the nests of other birds, and then she just relies on those foster parents' instincts to take care of any eggs that are in their nest.
So they just see the eggs, and boom, the parenting instinct kicks in, even if it's not their own kid.
Exactly. They respond to that releaser of having eggs in the nest, and the cuckoo basically gets a free ride. Her offspring gets raised by somebody else.
Talk about a clever evolutionary strategy, although maybe a little bit ruthless too. But it does make me wonder about us, humans. Where do we fit into all of this instinct stuff? Do we even have instincts?
Ooh, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's a question that's generated a ton of debate over the years. There are some scientists who argue that humans don't really have instincts at all. Others say, of course we do. But it can be really tricky to define what we mean by instinct in humans.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a big debate.
Yeah.
There's so much variation in human behavior. What might look like instinct in one culture could just be something that's learned in another.
Right, exactly. So how do you tease those two things apart, the innate versus the learned? It's a real challenge. One thing researchers do is they look at infants. Observing babies from a very early age can help pinpoint those behaviors that seem to be present basically right from birth.
So like we were talking about with the sea turtles, but with human babies.
Yeah, exactly. And if it's there from the very beginning, it hints that there might be this biological basis.
So what kinds of things are they looking at in those little babies?
Well, things like facial expressions, for instance. Research suggests that babies can display those basic emotions like happiness, sadness, anger, disgust, even babies who are born blind. So it's like they have this sort of innate emotional vocabulary.
That is wild.
Yeah.
But how do you know for sure that they're not, somehow picking up on subtle cues from their environment, even without sight?
It's a good question, and it's definitely tricky. But it makes you think, right? Another thing researchers do is compare human behavior to what we see in other animals, especially our primate cousins.
Right, because if we see similar behaviors across species, that hints that there might be some deeper evolutionary root.
Exactly. It suggests that maybe there is this biological basis for that behavior.
So like common threads across the animal kingdom, what kinds of things have they found to be similar between us and, say, chimps or gorillas?
One really interesting example is play behavior. Young animals across a bunch of species, and that includes us, right? Human children engage in play that doesn't seem to have like an immediate survival purpose.
Like it's not about finding food or avoiding danger. It's just about like having fun, right?
Right. But the thing is, it's remarkably similar across species, which suggests that there might actually be a biological function for play.
That's so cool. So maybe those endless hours my niece spends building Lego towers. Maybe it's not just about having fun. Maybe there's something more going on there, something deeper.
Exactly. And I think that brings us back to this idea that it's not really nature versus nurture, right? It's not like one side wins. It's about appreciating how those two forces work together to shape who we are.
So it's not instinct or our learning. It's how those two things work together. That makes a lot of sense. But I'm still kind of stuck on this idea of, if humans do have instincts, aren't they just way weaker or less obvious than the kinds of instincts we see in animals? Like, we don't see those fixed action patterns playing out in us the same way.
I think that's true. We don't see those same rigid FAPs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that instincts are absent in humans. It's more like they're just way more flexible and influenced by our big complex brains and the cultures that we live in.
So it's not as simple as just seeing a releaser and then boom, the instinct kicks in.
Exactly. Think about something like fear. We all experience fear. It's a pretty universal human emotion. And the fight or flight response, that's like a hardwired physiological reaction to a threat. That's definitely got a strong biological
So
basis.
it's like our instinct kicking in, right?
Yeah, you could think of it that way. But the thing is, what we perceive as threatening, that can be hugely shaped by our experiences, by what we learn,
Yeah.
by our individual personalities.
Right, like some people are scared of spiders, other people are scared of heights, and it's not like everybody's afraid of the exact same things in the exact same way.
Right. So even though that initial physiological response might be instinctual, how that fear actually manifests, how we react to it, that's way more nuanced in humans. And that's why understanding human instinct, it's not about those simple, rigid definitions. It's about understanding how biology, psychology, and culture all mix together to create this complex picture.
This is making me think about what we were talking about before with those supernormal stimuli in animals. Could something similar be happening in humans? Like, could our modern environment be kind of like overflowing with all these supernormal stimuli that are messing with our instincts in ways that we don't even realize?
It's a really interesting question, and definitely one that a lot of researchers are thinking about these days. I mean, think about how easy it is to get our hands on super processed foods.
Oh, for sure. It's like everywhere you turn, there's something that's designed to be like super delicious.
And that's exactly the point. They're packed with sugar and salt and fat. Those things trigger our reward systems in our brains, but they trigger them in a way that natural foods just never could.
So we're basically overloading our brains with all these things that we evolved to crave, but now they're just like everywhere and in super concentrated forms.
Exactly. Our brains, they evolved in a world where finding food took a lot of effort and those things were scarce.
Yeah.
Now we're surrounded by these hyperpalatable foods that basically just hijack those ancient drives.
And it's not just food, right?
No.
Like, what about all our devices and that constant stream of information and entertainment?
Right. That's another huge one. Social media, with all the likes and notifications, it taps right into our instinct for connection, for approval. We're social creatures, right? But the way that social media delivers those things is just completely unnatural, and it creates this feedback loop that can be really hard to escape.
So, like, our ancient instincts for connection are getting funneled into these platforms, which might not be the healthiest thing for us in the long run.
Exactly. It's like a mismatch between our old wiring and this brand new environment.
It really makes you think, so are we just doomed then? Like, are our instincts just going to keep getting hijacked by all this modern stuff?
Well, I don't think it's that bleak. I think the key here is awareness. By understanding our instincts, by recognizing those inherent tendencies and how they might be manipulated, we can start to take back some control. We can make more conscious choices about how we engage with the world around us.
So it's like we need to develop like a new set of instincts for navigating this modern world.
Maybe. But I think more importantly, we need to cultivate that awareness, that understanding of how our brains work and how they interact with our environment.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from those fixed action patterns in animals to the complexities of human instinct and how our modern world might be tweaking those ancient tendencies.
Yeah. It's amazing how much there is to learn about something that we often just take for granted.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that we're not just these like rational beings making choices in a vacuum. We are products of millions of years of evolution, and our biology is still shaping our thoughts and feelings and actions in all these ways that we're only just beginning to understand.
And that realization, I think, is pretty exciting. It opens up all these new possibilities for exploring what it means to be human.
Well said. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into instinct. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep that scientific curiosity burning bright.